My son told me I wasn't welcome at my own Thanksgiving table. He said I would embarrass him in front of the clients he was trying to impress. The clients sitting in the house I paid for, eating the food I subsidized, drinking the wine I bought. He thought he was managing a problem. He had no idea he was lighting the fuse. I stood on the porch of that 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Ridge Drive, and I did not yell. I did not pound on the door. I simply walked back to my truck, sat down in the driver's seat, and opened the banking app on my phone. I found the scheduled transfer, $3,100, set to hit midnight, the same as every first of the month for 6 years. My thumb hovered over the screen for exactly 3 seconds. Then I canceled it. Then I called my lawyer. But before I tell you what happened when I came back to that house, let me tell you who I am. My name is Robert Calloway. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years building Calloway Construction from a single used flatbed truck and a handshake reputation into the largest residential contractor in the Tri-County area. I hired 400 people at peak. I signed their paychecks every other Friday without missing once. I sold the company 6 years ago for $11 million, and I drove home in the same 2003 Silverado. I had been driving since before my son graduated high school. My hands are rough. My clothes are practical. I have a closet full of flannel and a checking account that would make most people's eyes water. My son Kevin knew about the checking account. He just forgot where it came from. The drive out to Maple Ridge took me 40 minutes on Thanksgiving morning. I had a bottle of good bourbon in the passenger seat, a pecan pie I picked up from the bakery where my late wife Margaret used to order every year, and a carefully wrapped box in the back seat. Inside the box was my old leather jacket, not a fancy jacket, not a designer piece. A brown Carhartt I bought at a hardware store in 1994 and wore to every major milestone of my career. I wore it when I hired my first full-time crew. I wore it when I signed my first $1 million contract. And I wore it the morning I sat across the table from the buyers and signed the papers that sold everything I had built. I had kept that jacket in my closet at the apartment ever since. That morning I decided to give it to Kevin. I thought maybe if he put it on, some of the discipline it represented might soak into him. I had been invited for 2 o'clock. I arrived at 1:55. I rang the bell and waited. I could hear voices inside. More voices than I expected, the sound of a dinner party already in full swing. The door opened a crack, the way a door opens when whoever is behind it does not actually want to let you in. My son's face appeared in the gap. He was wearing a blazer I had never seen, his hair gelled back in a way that looked borrowed from someone else's personality. "Dad," he said, his voice low and clipped. "What are you doing here so early?" It was not a question. It was a complaint dressed as one. I held up the pecan pie. "It is 2 o'clock, Kevin. You said 2 o'clock. He slipped through the crack the same way a person exits a room they do not want you to enter. He pulled the door shut behind him and stood on the porch, adjusting his blazer, not looking at me directly. "Look," he said, "there has been a change of plans. Marcus Heller is inside, from Heller Capital, and his partner. This is a working dinner, Dad. It is important. These guys are looking at a deal that could change everything for us." I looked at my son. I looked at the blazer. I looked at the way his eyes kept cutting to the window. "I am your father," I said. "It is Thanksgiving." He finally looked at me then, and I saw something in his face I had not seen before. Not embarrassment, not nervousness, calculation. He was running numbers behind his eyes, and I was coming up short. "You know how you are," he said quietly. "You start talking about the old job sites and the union problems in the early days, and it doesn't play well with this crowd. These are sophisticated investors, Dad. They are not going to connect with stories about pouring concrete in the rain. Diane worked very hard on this dinner. Please don't make it awkward." I stood there on the porch of the home I had made the down payment on, holding a pie his mother used to order every November, and my son told me I did not play well. "I'll call you next week," he said. "We can do something low-key. A burger. Something that fits better." He reached out and took the pie from my hands. He did not thank me for it. He turned back to the door. "What about the box?" I said. "In the truck. I brought something for you." He did not even turn around. "Just leave it, Dad. I'll grab it another time." The door closed. The lock clicked, and I stood there on the porch listening to laughter on the other side of the wood. I should have left. The old version of me would have left. He would have driven home, microwaved a frozen dinner, and spent Thanksgiving watching football until he fell asleep in the recliner. That man had spent a lot of years making himself small so Kevin would feel big. That man believed patience was the same thing as love. But I did not leave. I walked around the side of the house instead. The back of the property had a low cedar fence and a row of spruce trees I had paid to have planted 4 years ago when Diane decided the yard needed structure. I moved along the fence line until I reached the corner nearest the dining room. The windows were cracked open despite the November chill. Diane always ran the heat too high. I had noticed that about her the first year they moved in. I could see the table through the glass. 8 people seated, candles lit. Good china I recognized as the set I bought them for their wedding. Kevin was at the head of the table. Diane was at the other end, luminous in a red dress, laughing at everything the heavyset man to her left said. That would be Marcus Heller, I assumed. There was an open bottle of something I had sent them 3 months ago, a Napa Valley cab I had picked up at an auction dinner. Kevin raised his glass. I could not hear everything through the glass and the distance, but I heard enough. I always heard enough on job sites, too. You learn to pick voices out of noise when you have spent decades managing crews. I caught the words built this from scratch. I caught self-made. I saw the opportunity, and I moved. I stood very still. Then I heard Diane's voice, clear and pleased. Kevin is not someone who waits for things to be handed to him, she was saying. He creates his own luck. We both do. That is the only way we know. I looked at the house that sat on a lot I had scouted, the house whose down payment I had written a check for from my personal account, the house whose mortgage I had been covering every month because Kevin's real estate business produced irregular income, which was a polite way of saying it lost money with remarkable consistency. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I did not recognize at first. Then I placed it. It was from Tyler. Tyler was my grandson. He was 15. Kevin and Diane's son, and he was the only honest person inside that house. He texted one line. Grandpa, are you here? Mom told me you weren't coming. I saved you a plate. I typed back. I'm outside. Stay put. Don't tell them. I moved further along the fence line toward the side patio, a screened area with a gas heater where I had once sat with Kevin on a summer evening drinking beer and talking about nothing in particular. Back when we still did that. I heard voices there before I saw the figures. Kevin and Diane, both holding glasses, speaking in the tense, low register of people who have been holding a harder conversation underneath the polished one inside. Did he leave? Diane asked. Kevin exhaled. Yes. I handled it. Good. Diane's voice was flat and efficient in the way of a person who has made many decisions and stopped apologizing for them. Because Marcus asked me directly if the house was ours. I told him yes. If your father had walked in here looking like he just finished a roofing job, asking where the beer was, the whole narrative falls apart. I gripped the fence post. Kevin said something I almost missed. He said, "It will all be cleaner soon anyway." Diane responded immediately. The meeting with Dr. Fielding is set for the 9th. I told him your father has been having episodes. Confusion. Aggression. Getting lost driving routes he has taken for 30 years. Fielding will evaluate him and I have already drafted the paperwork. Once we have medical documentation, the petition for conservatorship goes through probate in 30 days. I felt the cold move through me, and it had nothing to do with November. Once we have conservatorship, Kevin said, we control the accounts. We refinance the house properly. We use the equity to fund the capital raise, and we stop having to explain why a 67-year-old man's name is on all the paperwork. And the apartment, Diane said. We sell it, Kevin replied. That is another $400,000 in liquidity. He does not need 2 bedrooms and a parking spot. Where does he go? Kevin asked himself as much as her, and his voice carried something that might have been guilt if it had anywhere to land. There is a facility, Diane said, in Tucson. Public, Medicaid. His Social Security covers the monthly rate. We surrender that and they maintain him. It costs us nothing from the principal. Tucson, Kevin repeated. It is warm, she said briskly. He likes warm weather. Besides, Once he is declared incapacitated, he cannot contest the asset transfers. It becomes a probate matter, and the judge rubber stamps whatever the conservator decides. That is us, Kevin. That is our retirement. I stood in the dark behind a row of spruce trees I had paid for, and I listened to my son price out the facility that would swallow what was left of my life. I listened to my daughter-in-law calculate the sale of my apartment with the same tone she used to order furniture. They went back inside. The door clicked shut. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. Long enough for the pie smell to fully fill the cab. Long enough for the bourbon to be a serious temptation and for me to decide against it. I needed to think clearly. I had built an $11 million company on clear thinking under pressure. I could do it again. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to my lawyer, Dennis Park. Dennis and I had worked together for 22 years. He was the kind of lawyer who answered on holidays because he understood that problems do not observe holidays. Dennis picked up on the second ring. He listened without interrupting, which was why I had kept him for 22 years. When I finished, he said, "Robert, I need you to drive to my office right now. I have been waiting for you to make this call for 3 years." The second call was to a man named Frank Greer. Frank was a private investigator I had put on retainer 18 months ago. I had not told anyone. I had started to notice things. Small things first. A discrepancy in a bank statement, Kevin referring to the house as his investment at a family gathering. Diane asking me once, casually, as if out of nowhere, whether I had updated my estate documents recently. Small things that a man who spent 3 decades watching job sites could add up. Frank answered immediately. His voice told me he had been waiting too. "Give me everything," I said. "Do not soften it." He did not soften it. Kevin owed $340,000 to 2 private lenders and 1 individual, who Frank described as not someone you want to be late with. The real estate business had produced 1 completed project in 4 years. The rest had been earnest money lost, contractors unpaid, and 1 civil judgment already on record. Kevin had been servicing the debt by pulling from a joint account he had opened in both our names 4 years ago, under the pretense of an investment vehicle I had apparently agreed to. My signature was on the opening documents. I did not remember signing them. I told Frank that. He told me to look carefully at the signature on the copies he was about to send me. I looked at them. The pen pressure was wrong. The loop on the B in Robert was wrong. It was a practiced forgery, but it was a forgery. My son had signed my name to a joint account and had been pulling from it for 18 months. Frank then told me about the insurance policies. Kevin had borrowed against the cash value of 2 life insurance policies I had taken out in both our names after Margaret died. He had used the proceeds to cover one of the lender payments 6 months ago. The cash value was nearly depleted. He also told me about the Heller dinner. Marcus Heller was not simply a potential investor. He was a man Kevin had been courting for 8 months, promising him an ownership stake in a commercial property deal that required a capital raise of $1.2 million. The collateral Kevin had listed in the pitch materials was the house on Maple Ridge Drive. The house he did not own. "Get me the documents," I told Frank. "Physical copies. Meet me at Dennis's office in 40 minutes. I started the truck. Before I pulled away from the curb, the side door of the garage opened. Tyler stepped out, carrying a bag of recycling. He stopped when he saw me. He dropped the bag and walked quickly to the truck, checking over his shoulder once. He climbed in without being asked. He smelled like the inside of that house, like candles and whatever Diane spritzed on everything she considered presentable. "Grandpa," he said. His voice was cracked with the particular exhaustion of someone who had been holding too many things for too long. I heard them. Before dinner. In the kitchen. Dad and Mom were talking about a doctor. About making you seem like you were not okay. I heard the word Tucson. "I know," I said. His jaw tightened. "What are we going to do?" I noticed he said we. That mattered to me more than I could explain in that moment. "I am going to take care of it," I said. "But I need you to go back inside. Pack a bag. Just the things that matter to you. The things nobody gave you. The things you actually chose. Tuck it under your bed. When I come back, and I am coming back tonight, you walk out the front door with me and you do not look back." He stared at me. "Tonight." Before the dessert dishes are cleared, I said. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. Then he said, Grandpa, the jacket, the one you brought, in the box. What about it? Mom saw it on the porch. She said it looked like something from a donation bin. She told Dad to throw it away. Dad put it in the recycling. I looked at the bags by the garage door. Tyler said, I took it out. It is in my room. I knew it was important. I don't know why, but I knew. I looked at my grandson. He had his grandmother's eyes. That jacket was on my back when I signed the papers that gave your father everything he has, I said. You did right to save it. Go inside, Tyler. Keep your head down. When you see my truck pull up again, you be at that front door. He got out. He straightened up, squared his shoulders the way a boy does when he decides to be something larger than he was a minute ago. He walked back into the garage. I drove to Dennis's office. The next 90 minutes were the most efficient of my retirement. Dennis had coffee made and 2 paralegals already pulling documents. Frank arrived 15 minutes after me with a file I had to hold with both hands. We worked through it systematically, the way I used to work through a construction bid, line by line, no assumptions. By the time we were done, Dennis had drafted 3 documents. The first was a formal revocation of the joint account agreement, citing the fraudulent signature. The second was a notice to the mortgage servicer withdrawing the guarantor authorization I had provided 6 years earlier, effective immediately, meaning the next payment would bounce and Kevin would receive formal notice of default. The third was a letter to the lenders whose names appeared in Frank's file, informing them that any representations made regarding collateral held in the name of the Calloway Family Trust were unauthorized and fraudulent, and that the trust would be pursuing legal remedy. There was also the matter of the insurance policies. Dennis said that constituted financial elder abuse under state statute. He had already drafted the referral to the district attorney's office. He would file it Monday unless I told him otherwise. File it Monday, I said. There was one more thing I needed. Dennis, I said. The house. He slid a document across the desk without me finishing the sentence. He had already prepared it. It was a notice of immediate termination of the tenancy at will agreement, citing material breach of the occupancy conditions through criminal conduct affecting the trust property. Kevin and Diane were required to vacate within 72 hours, with a civil standby from the sheriff's department available upon request. I signed it. The pen felt heavier than usual, but my hand was steady. We left Dennis's office at 8:47. Dennis rode with me. Frank followed in his car, and behind Frank's car was a tow truck I had called on Dennis's recommendation. The Audi in Kevin's driveway was leased through a corporate account that still ran through my old holding company. It had been leased in the company name since before I sold the business, a convenience I had never bothered to untangle. Tonight, I was untangling it. I pulled onto Maple Ridge Drive and parked directly in front of the house. No 3 doors down, no courtesy distance. I parked with my front bumper 6 inches from their mailbox. The lights inside were warm. I could see movement through the front window. The dinner was still going. Marcus Heller's car was still in the driveway. I got out of the truck. I did not check my hair. I did not adjust my collar. I was wearing a flannel shirt and work boots, and I was the most dangerous person within a 4-block radius. I still had a key. I had cut 2 keys when I arranged the purchase, kept one, given one to Kevin. He had never asked for mine. That told me everything about how he thought of me. He thought of me as a permanent utility, always available, never requiring management. The key turned smoothly. I opened the door and walked into the foyer. The dinner table was visible from the entrance. Candles, the good china, the cab from the auction bottle. 8 people, some looking up from dessert plates, some mid-sentence. Kevin, at the head of the table. Diane beside the fireplace with a small plate in her hand, already frozen, already reading the situation the way predators read intrusions. Kevin saw me. His face did the thing faces do when the impossible happens. It emptied of everything rehearsed, leaving only the animal. "Dad," he said. His voice came out flat and strange. "How did you—" I walked to the dining room. I did not rush. I had never rushed on a job site when the stakes were real. Rushing was for people who had not prepared. I looked at the table. I found the heavy-set man at Kevin's right. Marcus Heller had the face of a man who had been in many rooms and could read them quickly. He was already reading this one. "Mr. Heller," I said. He looked at me carefully. "Yes, my name is Robert Calloway. I own this house." The silence that followed was the particular silence of a room where everyone has just recalculated something important. Kevin stood up. The chair scraped back hard. "Dad," he said, and now his voice was different, the management tone gone, the raw edge of a man who can see his infrastructure collapsing. "You need to come with me. You are confused. You have been under a lot of stress, and sometimes you get turned around. Let me get you some water." He started walking around the table toward me. "I am not confused, Kevin," I said. My voice carried the room. "I have not been confused in 67 years. Sit down." He stopped. Something in the register of my voice landed on him, the way it used to land on crews who needed to understand that the site foreman was not making suggestions. He sat down. I looked at Marcus Heller again. "He told you he owns this house," I said. "He told you he is a self-made man who built his portfolio from ambition and instinct. Is that roughly accurate?" Heller was very still. "That is the impression I received," he said carefully. He mentioned this property as potential collateral for the capital raise. I reached into my jacket and produced the first document Dennis had prepared. I set it on the table in front of Heller. He looked at it, then at Kevin, then back at me. "This is the deed of trust," I said. "This house was purchased in 2018 with funds from my personal account. The down payment was $230,000. The monthly mortgage has been paid from an auto draft connected to my accounts every single month since closing. Kevin and Diane are listed as tenants by permission of the trust. Not owners. Tenants. And as of tonight, that permission is being revoked." Marcus Heller pushed back from the table a few inches, the body language of a man beginning the process of exit. Diane moved then. She came around the edge of the fireplace with the composed urgency of a person executing a contingency plan. She put her hand on my arm, her voice pivoting to the smooth, concerned register I had heard through the fence. "Robert," she said, "we are worried about you. You called Dennis today, and you seemed very disoriented on the phone. You have been under tremendous pressure. We think you should sit down and let us take you home, and tomorrow we can talk through all of this calmly." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at the diamond earrings I had given her the Christmas of 2019, when I thought gestures like that built something. "I was not on the phone with Dennis today," I said. "Dennis was with me in his office preparing these documents." "Try again." Her hand dropped. "Mr. Heller," I continued, "before you make any investment decisions involving my son, you should be aware that the collateral he is offering belongs to a trust he does not control. You should also be aware that he currently carries $340,000 in unresolved debt to private lenders, one of whom I am told has made physical threats. I am not telling you this to embarrass him. I am telling you because you deserve accurate information before you write a check." Heller was already folding his napkin. His partner, who had not spoken since I entered, was reaching under his chair for his coat. Kevin's face was the color of old concrete. "This is harassment," Diane said, her composure beginning to fracture at the edges. "This is a family matter, and you are deliberately humiliating us in front of our guests. Kevin, call the police." "The police are already on the way," Dennis said from the doorway. He stepped into the light holding the second document. His voice was the voice of a man who had been in courtrooms for 30 years and was not remotely concerned. "I am Dennis Park, attorney for the Calloway Family Trust. I have a notice to vacate and a referral to the district attorney's office for financial elder abuse. Captain Reyes from the county sheriff's department will be here in approximately 12 minutes for the civil standby." Marcus Heller stood up completely. He looked at Kevin with an expression that was not anger but something more final than anger. "I think we will find our own way out," he said. "I will be in touch with my legal team on Monday." He walked out. His partner followed. 2 other guests followed without speaking. Within 3 minutes, the dinner table held only family. Kevin looked at me across the ruin of Diane's careful evening, the spilled stemware, the dessert plates going cold, the candles still burning as if nothing had happened. He looked genuinely young in that moment, the way a person looks when the story they have been telling about themselves stops working. "Dad," he started. I am going to need you to listen, I said. Not talk. Listen. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table, the chair where Kevin had been sitting. I did not do it to humiliate him. I did it because I was tired and it was the closest chair and I had been on my feet for 3 hours. I know about the joint account, I said. I know about the signature. I know about the insurance policies. I know about the lenders. I know about Marcus Heller's pitch materials listing a house you do not own as collateral. And I know about Dr. Fielding and I know about Tucson. Diane sat down slowly, as if her legs had quietly stopped cooperating. Kevin said nothing. He was not a stupid man. He understood that silence was his only option when he had no story left to tell. I also know you told me today that I do not play well with your crowd, I said. That I tell stories about job sites and union problems and pouring concrete in the rain. And you are right. I do tell those stories. Because those stories are the reason you have a crowd to play with. Those stories paid for the house you are sitting in. Those stories put Tyler through the school he attends. Those stories are the only reason Marcus Heller was worth courting in the first place, because the only capital you have ever actually had access to was built in those stories. I pulled the velvet box from my jacket pocket. I set it on the table between us. You had this thrown away, I said. Kevin looked at it. His jaw worked. I opened the lid. The leather jacket was folded inside. Tyler had been thoughtful enough to do that. I lifted it out and held it up. I wore this jacket the day I signed the papers selling Callaway Construction, I said. The buyers brought their whole legal team. 3 attorneys, 2 accountants, a financial advisor. They all wore suits. I wore this. You know what the lead buyer said to me when we finished? He said, Robert, I have been doing acquisitions for 20 years, and I have never seen a seller who knew his numbers better than his own accountants. He said, wherever you built what you built, that is where I want to invest next. He was not talking about the jacket. He was talking about what was inside it. The standard, the discipline, the refusal to be anything other than exactly what I am. I set the jacket back in the box. You threw this away because you thought it would embarrass you in front of people who were going to walk out of your house in 15 minutes regardless, I said. That is the summary of everything you have gotten wrong. Kevin's eyes were wet. Diane's were not. She was already somewhere else in her head, already calculating the fallout, already looking for the next angle. I had watched enough people in enough tight spots to know the difference between grief and strategy. The sound of a car outside. Dennis checked his phone. That will be the sheriff, he said quietly. I stood up. I looked at my son one more time. I tried to find the boy who used to ride in the truck with me on Saturday mornings, the one who asked questions about every piece of equipment we passed on the highway. He was in there somewhere behind the blazer and the debt and the years of choosing ease over honesty. I am amending the trust documents tonight, I said. Kevin and Diane are removed as contingent beneficiaries effective immediately. Tyler's educational fund will be placed in a protected account that neither of you can access. I will be named as sole custodial trustee until he turns 25. Diane found her voice. You cannot do that. He is our son. He is my grandson, I said. And the only person in this house who never asked me for anything except my time. I walked to the base of the stairs. I raised my voice just enough to carry up. Tyler. A pause. Then feet on the stairs. Quick and purposeful. Tyler came down carrying the backpack I had asked him to pack. He was wearing his regular clothes, jeans and a hoodie, and he had the Hamilton watch I had never owned. But he had the look of someone who had just made a decision they would not regret. He stopped beside me. He looked at his parents. His mother's face was marble. His father's was undone. Tyler, Diane said softly. Baby, stay here. This is a misunderstanding. Tyler looked at her for a moment. He said, You told me to pretend Grandpa was the handyman when my friends came over. He said it without accusation, just as fact. The way you say a thing that has been sitting inside you long enough to settle into something solid. She had no answer for that. I put my hand on Tyler's shoulder. We walked to the front door. I opened it, and we stepped into the November air. The sheriff's cruiser was pulling up to the curb behind Dennis's car. Behind the cruiser, the tow truck was already backing toward the Audi in the driveway. Tyler noticed the tow truck. He looked at me. The car is leased through the company, I said. My company. He nodded as if this made complete sense. Dennis handled the handoff with the deputy, while Tyler and I walked to the truck. I opened the passenger door. He climbed in and set his backpack between his feet. I went around and got in the driver's side. I sat for a moment with the engine off. I looked at the house. The lights were still on. The candles were probably still burning. Inside, Dennis would be serving the papers, and the deputy would be explaining what a civil standby meant, and Diane would be trying one more strategy, and Kevin would be sitting in the chair at the head of the table in a borrowed blazer, trying to figure out where the last 20 years went. I started the engine. "Where are we going?" Tyler asked. "My apartment," I said. "It is small. 1 bathroom, not 2. The couch pulls out, which is where you will sleep until we find you something better." He said that sounded fine. I said, "You are going to hear a lot of hard things in the next few weeks. About your parents. About money. About things that adults do when they are afraid. Some of it is going to make you angry, and some of it is going to make you sad, and some of it is going to make you feel guilty, even though none of it is your fault. Those feelings are normal. But when they come, I want you to look at that watch." He looked at his wrist. He was not wearing a watch. "I mean the one I am going to give you," I said. "I have a Hamilton that belonged to me the day I started the company. Not the day I sold it. The day I started it. When I had 1 truck and no employees and more debt than sense. I kept it because on days when everything felt impossible, I looked at the time and I thought, every minute that passes is a minute of work I can do. That is all it is. Time and work." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did you actually wear the Carhartt jacket to the closing?" I smiled. "Every button," he laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded, the laugh of a kid who had not laughed honestly in a while. I pulled away from the curb. I did not look at the house in the rearview mirror. There was nothing there I needed to see. The house was a building. The equity was an asset. Dennis would handle the mechanics of the liquidation and the trust amendment and the district attorney referral and the lender notifications. He was a good lawyer, and I paid him well, and he enjoyed work that mattered. What mattered to me was sitting in the passenger seat with a backpack at his feet and his grandfather's laugh still settling in his chest. I turned onto the highway. The November sky was clear. The kind of clear you only get when the temperature drops and the air loses any patience for pretense. Tyler fiddled with the radio until he found a station playing something instrumental, a slow piece with a lot of piano and very little noise. We drove. After a while, he said, "Were you scared when you were starting out? The company. Were you scared?" "Every single day," I said. "But you kept going. What else was there to do?" I said. "You either build something or you don't. Fear doesn't get a vote. It just rides along." He thought about that. I thought about Margaret, who had believed in the company before it was a company, before it was anything except a man with rough hands and a plan sketched on the back of a hardware store receipt. She would have known what to do with Tyler. She always knew exactly what each person needed and when they needed it. I was still learning, but I had time. That was the thing about 67 that no one who had not gotten there yet fully understood. You think time is running out. Then one day you realize that what runs out is not time but patience for the things that do not matter. And once that patience is gone, you are left with only the things that do. I had my grandson. I had my lawyer and my PI, and my leather jacket, and the recording Dennis had made of this evening, which would be entered into evidence come Monday morning. And I had the road ahead, which was long and lit and pointed forward. That was enough. That was more than enough. It was everything.